to this event. We very much look forward to it. Today we're going to have 3 panels on the impact of artificial intelligence on diplomacy and international relations. And the subject is quite timely, but hasn't received a lot of attention yet. So we've been working to organize this event together with the DiploFoundation. So we meaning the Center for Data Innovation. We're based in Brussels, but also Washington, D.C. And we're a think tank that educates policymakers and the general public to the benefits of data-driven innovation at the intersection of tech and policy. So today we're going to have, as I said, 3 panels with many interesting and inspiring speakers. And I hope you'll enjoy each of the conversations and that you'll be able to stay with us until 1:30, which is when we'll have some lunch together. The first panel will introduce the geostrategic impacts of artificial intelligence. And the second panel will introduce AI as a tool for diplomacy in practice. And then the third one will go through AI and the links with human rights and ethics in international relations. I'd like to give the floor to my lovely colleague Teresa from DiploFoundation. And thank you very much and have a great day.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Eileen. For Diplo, it has been such a pleasure to cooperate with the Center for Data Innovation on this event. Brussels was one of the choices that we had in mind for the launch event of the report on artificial intelligence on diplomacy, and we are so pleased that we've made this choice. Really, you've made it much easier here, and we are absolutely thrilled with the interest in this event. So excuse us for the change of venue for the event, but it was all made for us to be able to accommodate all of you to participate. For those of you that do not know Diplo, we are DiploFoundation, if you wish. We are an organization that does a lot of training and capacity development activities in mainly digital policy issues. We have had the pleasure to cooperate with excellent partners, and one of them being the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, with whom we worked together some time ago on a study tackling data diplomacy. And as a natural evolution, we are so thrilled that we had the opportunity to work with our Finnish partners again on the issue of what impact do all the developments in artificial intelligence have on the practice of diplomacy. First of all, I'm so happy that we have the lead author of the study with us. It's Dr. Katharina Höne, who will be introducing the study later. But before that, I would like to ask our lovely colleague Sini Paukkunen from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, from the Policy and Planning and Research section, to tell us a few words. Sini, thank you very much for coming, and please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teresa. And it's really a great pleasure and even a privilege to be here with you this morning. And just to start with, I have to say that, of course, during the past few years, it has become very clear that artificial intelligence will become a key driver of change. And it will lead to improvement in productivity and new ways of working, as well as business opportunities. And I think governments all around the world, including the EU, have scrambled to set targets to improve their AI-related capabilities, know-how, competitiveness. And as these objectives usually deal with questions of education, research and development, and business opportunities, much of the debate and decision-making has taken place outside the hardcore foreign and security policy domain. And as concerns to ethical matters, possible harmful consequences and increased demand for international regulation of AI may become or have become more pronounced. And it has been acknowledged that foreign policy perspectives matter and that foreign policy actors need to be partners in shaping AI-related policies. And so, as we know, AI is not a single technology, but a collection of technologies, methods and applications, and has countless uses and consequences. And we can only guess the shape of developments in the future. And diplomats, as myself, are rarely experts in technology. My personal experience is that sometimes it can take many diplomats to set up one mobile phone or PowerPoint presentation, as such technical expertise or understanding is not necessarily in the hardcore of our education or in our DNA, so to say. But with such self-irony, I wish to stress that we need to work closely with those who possess the expertise in technological matters. And still, diplomats are experts in foreign affairs. It's our task to make the assessment on how exactly new technologies affect international relations, diplomacy, and the everyday work in foreign ministries. Last summer, we, so to say, took the risk and we put 3 high-level artificial intelligence experts and 100 ambassadors into one room in our annual ambassadorial conference. Nobody protested or complained about hypothetical linkages to science fiction or anything like that. And indeed, we were in the building of our parliament, and our committee for the future has worked there for many decades, so there wouldn't have been any justification for that kind of complaint. But in fact, what happens, and on a more serious note, was that I think a great amount of interest and appetite for the theme grew. And what was found particularly interesting amongst the ambassadors was that what and how the others, especially outside Europe, are doing: China, India, US, Russia. And at the end of the day, very few thought that AI did not directly touch their work. And the work of combining AI and foreign policy has already started. We can pinpoint developments and themes that call our attention. There are already international negotiations aiming at governing certain uses of artificial intelligence. Ethical guidelines are developed in both EU and UN setups, and some MFAs already pioneer tools that utilize AI solutions. In addition, just to flag, next month Finland will be hosting a conference on AI and human rights in the context of the chairmanship of the Council of Europe. So, the Finnish MFI supports research and debate concerning transformation and the future of diplomacy. In the past, we have had the opportunity to elaborate these topics with the always reliable Lingendal Institute. And during 2017 and 18, as Teresa mentioned, the brilliant researchers of the DiploFoundation helped us to increase our understanding of big data from a foreign policy perspective. And as the first experience was so successful, and the study became really a kind of bestseller, it was easy to hook up with the Diplo once again last year, and this time with a focus on artificial intelligence and foreign policy making. But so, the report that will be published today, which has a very long title, mapping the challenges and opportunities of AI for the conduct of diplomacy, will no doubt find readers in the foreign ministries and international organizations all around the world. And as part of the next steps, which we hope to see with some of you coming on board, we should also work hard to avoid an exclusive club or an AI bubble of the North. Sustainable development goals might be a way to involve also some of our least developed partners in terms of substance too. But finally, it's my pleasure to thank all those who have contributed to this work, and especially Mrs. Katharina Höne, whose professionalism one can always count on. And finally, I'm so happy to see so many people attending this event. I warmly welcome you also on behalf of the Finnish MFA. And let's be open to new knowledge, let's share our own insights, and let's finally make foreign policy readier to face the challenges of the AI era. And let's do some lifelong learning ourselves, and let's not only talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sini, for these very, very kind introductory remarks. And before I continue actually giving you insight into the study and some of the details of what we found and what we're gonna release today to the public, let me move this a little bit so the sound hopefully gets a little bit better. And also now I'm a bit more central. It also helps. Okay, so my name is Katharina Höne. I'm a senior researcher with DiploFoundation. And, well, today it's my pleasure to introduce our new study to you on artificial intelligence and diplomacy. We had the most brilliant introduction by Sini from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. So I think I can get right into it. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we are encountering a number of challenges and a number of opportunities as well. In a sense, what I think is quite difficult in an undertaking like the one we had with this report is to navigate this distance between, on the one hand, the hype associated with AI, and on the other hand, these kind of dystopian visions. I think we all can remember very prominent members of the public warning us that the end of humanity is here. But at the same time, we can also kind of still hear people saying that now, with advances in artificial intelligence, everything is going to get better, we're going to achieve these sustainable development goals very easily. So I think the problem when we start to think about diplomacy and artificial intelligence and diplomacy and foreign policy is to kind of maybe find a middle ground, but also to navigate both of these kind of challenges, both of these positions that are quite extreme. For us as researchers and practitioners of foreign policy, the other challenge is that, let us be honest, we don't quite know. AI is such a vast topic. There's so many different elements to it, so many different approaches. So there's a tendency to generalize, but there's also a tendency to having to navigate something that experts, computer scientists, can barely navigate. So in this study, we have 5 parts to the study. And as I walk you through these 5 parts, I will give you a flavor of what we discuss in the report. What is important to keep in mind is that the report is meant as a conversation starter. It's meant as a first step to open the conversation, to give insights, food for thought. So basically, because the topic is so broad, and we're trying to basically map AI and diplomacy in a very broad sense, we can only look at the issues we can map in a broad sense. But I think after this, we really have to go into detail. So the way we try and map AI and diplomacy is in 5 steps. We provide an understanding of AI, and then we try to think, what is actually the relationship between diplomacy and AI? And here we offer 2 mappings, which I'm going to introduce to you. In the second step, we looked at the national AI strategies. And as you know, over the last 2 years, a number of countries have released national AI strategies. So it's quite interesting to actually take a look, what are they saying? And how are they comparing? And what are the main themes within these strategies? And what can we take away from them? Third, we look at AI as a tool for diplomacy. So here the question is, how does AI impact the daily work of diplomats? Or how can AI benefit diplomats and foreign policy professionals on a day-to-day basis as a tool? Fourth, we look at one particular topic when it comes to artificial intelligence in more detail. And in this case, in close cooperation with our Finnish partners, we chose to look at the connection between human rights and artificial intelligence as one example of a very established topic on the international agenda that is impacted by artificial intelligence, and where diplomats need to find ways to react appropriately. And last but not least, we make 3 very concrete suggestions. So as I mentioned, with this report we're trying to map the field of AI and diplomacy in a very broad sense, because there have been studies on national AI strategies, there have been studies on, for example, lethal autonomous weapons, but there hasn't been like a broad mapping. So in a sense, we try to open this field and this conversation, but at the same time, at the end of the study, we're trying to bring everything back together and make 3 recommendations for very concrete things that ministries of foreign affairs can do right now.
So let's get into it. I know in this room there are many experts. Having said this, I think it's quite important to still kind of start from a basic understanding so that we're all on the same level. So two things we want to highlight, or we think it's important to highlight. AI is an umbrella term for lots of different things. Lots of different ways of doing data analysis, lots of different ways of approaching the topic. So it's an umbrella term for lots of different things like machine learning, natural language processing, robotics, etc. That's one thing. The other thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about AI, we're actually talking about a moving target. So in that sense, what used to be called AI 20 years ago, 30 years ago, is no longer referred to as AI. So when we are speaking about AI, essentially we are speaking about something that's right at the cutting edge. It's something that we can do, but it's always this kind of future-looking, almost. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Just to give you a broad definition for those who are keen on definitions. So computer systems able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence. One definition of AI that we can use as a kind of working mode. The other important thing that many of you are aware of, the distinction between generalized and specialized AI. And I think that's very important to keep in mind. Some of the dystopian visions regarding AI very much focus on this idea of generalized AI. So an intelligence that can challenge human intelligence. However, all the applications of artificial intelligence we see today are a case of specialized AI, meaning it's something that is developed for one specific purpose and can only be used for that kind of purpose. So for example, when we see advancements or when we see in the news things like the chess champion was beaten by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is winning at Jeopardy. Or artificial intelligence has beaten the world Go champion. All these are cases of generalized intelligence, meaning the system is only applicable to one very specific task. I think that's important to keep in mind. So, as I spoke about mapping, one mapping we often do when we talk about technology and diplomacy is to look at three aspects. As a topic, as a tool, and as something that shapes the environment in which diplomacy and foreign policy is practiced. So AI as a topic, it's quite obvious. So artificial intelligence is impacting so many aspects of our lives. At the same time, it's impacting the international agenda just in the same way, and it's impacting the topics that diplomats need to deal with on a daily basis. Economic questions, social questions, ethical questions, more specific topics like lethal autonomous weapons, for example. That's one aspect. The second aspect is AI as a tool for diplomacy. And that's what you already saw in the overview that I gave you at the beginning. So the question is, if you have a new technology, how can this technology be made useful for the practice of diplomacy, for the everyday practice of diplomats? And for example, when we look at the mid-1990s, there was a big discussion about how email is going to shape the way diplomats are going to relate to each other. And I think with each new technological advancement, we're asking the same question. And a couple of years down the line, these things seem very natural and very normal. And so the question is, what can AI do now as a tool for diplomacy? And how will this look like in the near future? Will it become commonplace? Last but not least, AI is something that's shaping the environment in which diplomacy is practiced. And one of the most prominent examples is, of course, lethal autonomous weapons. So changing the balance of power, changing how states relate to each other on a fundamental level. Similarly, economic growth through advancements in AI technology, again, shaping the balance of power, shaping how states relate to each other. So we can think of AI and diplomacy in these three broad terms. And I think the key is, if you want to advance on the topic, and the foreign ministries want to think on this broad basis, it's quite useful to start with a mapping that is that broad. The second mapping I would like to introduce is drawing on the idea of science diplomacy. So science diplomacy is thinking about the relationship between science and diplomacy, how the two can support each other, and how the two relate to each other. And what I'm drawing on here specifically is a study or a typology proposed by the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the British Royal Society. And drawing on that, we come up with, again, a typology of 3 elements, which is diplomacy for AI, AI for diplomacy, and AI in diplomacy. So the first one, diplomacy for AI. What kind of diplomatic initiatives, what kind of negotiations can we think of that are actually advancing AI by fostering cooperation, for example? Second example, AI for diplomacy, is turning this on its head. If you think of research and development and scientists across borders coming together, then they have a role in promoting peace, for example, and they have a role in promoting cooperation across borders. So in this sense, the cooperation among scientists can help one of the main tasks of diplomacy, which is promoting peaceful relations. And there I have a quote which is from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And it describes it really, really well, I think. It says, the use of scientific cooperation among nations to address the common problems facing 21st century humanity and to build constructive international partnerships. So if we think of AI as that, as the cooperation among many different scientists across borders, we can think of AI as a tool to promote diplomacy. And the last element in the typology, AI in diplomacy. And here we're back to this idea of AI as a tool for diplomacy. So what are the specific applications that help foreign policy analysis? What are the specific applications that help on a day-to-day basis? Which brings me to the second element in the study, which is this kind of close look at national AI strategies. And as I mentioned, since 2017, we've seen quite a number of countries publishing national AI strategies or publishing reports that are meant to lead to a national AI strategy. And what is interesting, the kind of rhetoric we find in these strategies is a rhetoric of competition in a lot of ways. So I brought you 3 examples of this. One national AI strategy is saying to be at the forefront of the artificial intelligence and data revolution. Another strategy has the broad aim to harness the opportunities that the use of AI can offer with the aim of strengthening welfare and competitiveness. And then just a third example, work towards achieving and maintaining leading global excellence in research, development and application for AI. Some strategies are very specific in the kinds of goals they set. For example, the Chinese strategy is very, very specific in the goals it is setting. And there's this element of competition, this element of we want to be leaders in some area of AI, or we want to take a leadership role in this. We can contrast this also with elements of cooperation in those national AI strategies. And almost all strategies, bar 2, emphasize the need for cooperation. When we look at the strategies on a broad basis, we find 4 reasons for this need for cooperation, which is first, to pool resources for research and development. For example, a big question when we look at AI and specifically machine learning, the big question is access to big data. And a lot of countries struggle with access to big data, so cooperation is one of the elements within this. Need for cooperation is also to set standards, to develop an ethical framework, and last but not least, to build on and amplify shared norms. We can see this crystallized within the approach that the European Union is taking. And here I just have a couple of examples from the strategic note of the EU Commission, who's really exemplifying this. So, cooperation at the level of the EU, again, one of the key things is make access to data easier, enabling infrastructure investment in areas of importance, develop AI hubs, again, for research excellence, create a permanent network of AI research institutions, and then create the artificial intelligence platform. So if you remember when I talked about the typology, and I talked about AI, approaching AI from this science diplomacy perspective, and this idea of AI for diplomacy and diplomacy for AI, then that's exactly what I was talking about. It's one of the best examples of this. One interesting thing in terms of cooperation and in terms of cooperation at the international level is to look at the United Nations. And here the emphasis is very much on capacity building. And if you look at the UN system-wide strategic approach and roadmap for supporting capacity development on AI, we find an emphasis on least developed countries, on landlocked developing countries, and small island states. And the key point here is that the gap between those countries that have and the gap between those countries that have not should not widen. So the call is for capacity building efforts in exactly that area. Looking at all of this, in conclusion, there are a couple of recommendations we would issue. First, recognizing the importance of developing national AI strategies. As I said, quite a number of countries have developed national AI strategies or are on the way of doing so. Quite a number of other countries haven't done so yet. One commentator described this development as the race towards a national AI strategy to kind of signal that a country is on top of the development. And so one of the key recommendations is that countries who do not have a national AI strategy yet to work towards a strategy. And for other countries who are more advanced, to basically engage in capacity building to support the development towards national AI strategies. Then we talked about the importance of cooperation. And so we think it's important to seek cooperation with other countries, even beyond the usual suspects. And then last but not least, considering the development of AI-related capacities as part of international development cooperation. So again, this goes back to the United Nations report and this question of, we already have a digital divide, and we often talk about the danger of increasing that digital divide. Are we going to have the same thing with artificial intelligence? And what can countries do to minimize this gap or avoid this gap from appearing in the first place? Moving on, AI is a tool for diplomacy. So when we look at national AI strategies, we kind of look at AI as a topic for diplomacy. But what about AI as a tool for diplomacy? One way of starting this is to make a distinction between three types of intelligence: assisted intelligence, augmented intelligence, and automated intelligence. What we find is that with the current kind of state of AI, we are very much at the level of assisted or augmented intelligence. One of the interesting examples we discuss in the report is an example that kind of takes diplomatic text as primary. So the idea that diplomats work a lot with text, what can artificial intelligence do to support this work? One example we mentioned in the report is the Cognitive Trade Advisor. And it's a tool that searches across trade agreements and focuses on one particular aspect within these trade agreements, which is rules of origin. So it's not only able to search a vast variety of documents for this one tiny point, it then connects these to products, to other rules, and kind of draws a lot of connections around this idea. So we think when we speak of AI as a tool for diplomacy, a lot of advancement might be made in exactly this area. It comes through natural language processing. And the key thing here is that this is not just a smart search. It's something that is able to work with unstructured data, so text of very different kinds. And it's something that is able to draw, potentially, connections that we were not able to draw by just basically reading the text. When this tool that I mentioned, the Cognitive Trade Advisor, was introduced, one of the key things they emphasized was this potentially is saving time and resources. So it's not something to replace diplomats, it's something that basically frees up time and resources for the kinds of tasks that are uniquely human, that require uniquely human intelligence. What they also emphasized is if there are smaller delegations in trade negotiations, this tool can potentially save time for them in preparation, and in this way kind of level the playing field between bigger delegations with lots of resources and smaller delegations with fewer resources. Other examples, so we dealt with text on the question of natural language processing. Other examples include monitoring open data for crisis prevention. The open source unit of the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office is a very good example of this, of using open data and then using very simple AI tools of analysis to make sense of this. Another example is using machine learning to make sense of satellite images, and again to draw connections and patterns. And then as a third step, and here it gets more advanced, are complex systems that integrate all of these elements to basically help decision making. In terms of recommendations, what is very clear is that none of these applications comes off the shelf. So the important thing is that it will require ministries of foreign affairs to engage with the business sector, and it will require ministries of foreign affairs to engage in kind of longer term relationships and partnerships. Going back to this idea of AI as a topic for diplomacy, we picked one particular topic which we thought was quite important. In this case, AI and human rights. So this chapter was written by my colleagues, Maria Maciel and Lee Hibbert. And I hope I do justice to them in trying to summarize this here. What we looked at is the impact of AI and human rights in three rights in particular. The right to privacy, family, home, and correspondence, the prohibition of discrimination, and the right to hold opinions and freedom of expression. And what we found is that it is the potential of AI to discriminate, not so much the actual discrimination, that should be in our focus when we look at AI and human rights. The question of the impact of AI on these particular human rights is very much linked to this need for data. So when we look at AI machine learning, for example, that builds on big data, lots of questions we're talking about when we talk about the infringement of the potential infringement of human rights through applications of AI are very much linked to this need for data and big data. Last but not least, what we find, or what we like to emphasize is, it is the duty of states to encourage the private sector to design, develop, and deploy AI with respect for human rights. I think this is also where it comes full circle to questions of diplomacy and foreign policy. Last but not least, what we did here was a broad mapping exercise to give lots of food for thought and to kind of give a way of approaching this huge topic of AI and diplomacy, AI and foreign policy. But if we kind of draw this back to the question of what is it that ministries of foreign affairs can do right now in very practical terms, we come up with three things. First, indicators to track efforts. So, and this comes actually from the first suggestion. This direction was made by a German think tank, Stiftung Neue Verantwortung. So some of the AI strategies have very, very specific goals. Not all of them, it's very few. But these goals kind of set something to track towards to. But then the question is, if these are the outcomes or outputs, what about the input indicators? So what is it that ministries of foreign affairs should look at in terms of working towards this AI strategy? So questions that we can ask here, for example, is who are the employees who can reasonably work on AI topics? Who are the employees who can negotiate on these issues? Who are the employees who have been trained appropriately? So what is kind of going into this foreign policy strategy when it comes to AI? Second, capacity building. So here the point is not that every diplomat in a foreign ministry needs to know in detail about AI. But I think our point is that there needs to be a basic understanding, not just for those who deal with questions of AI on a regular basis, but for everyone. If we work towards this kind of advancement of AI in foreign policy, and if we really recognize the importance of AI in diplomacy and as a foreign policy issue. Last but not least, we suggest kind of organizational adjustment. So as we look at AI becoming more and more of a tool for diplomacy, one question is, how does this come back into the foreign ministry? And one suggestion is to have an agile, cross-cutting, small unit that can help to innovate. And one of the examples we found when we looked at big data, again, is the open source unit in the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So it's a very small unit that is diverse, interdisciplinary, and that looks at open data and analyzes open data sometimes applying AI tools. And if we are to innovate, and if we are really to ask the question, what can AI do as a tool for diplomacy, then having such a small unit who can, in an agile way, start to look into the topic, develop case studies, and then from there have a wider discussion in the foreign ministry would be a very useful first step. In relation to that, we suggest AI champions. So in various departments, selecting people who already have an interest in artificial intelligence or who have a background in computer science, who can communicate about these issues, who can communicate within their departments and within this kind of small AI unit to kind of foster a conversation on a much needed topic. On that note, let me end and let me invite questions.